kind of laughing about just the surrealness of what's happening to her.
Yeah.
And then when she walks away, like the cop's partner tries to like make a pass at her too. And it's so bizarre.
Yeah, and again, as he's beating the shit out of this homeless drunk guy, he's like got a big smile on his face. Like he's like, it's kind of this thing where he's getting a lot of pleasure out of the sadistic element of it, but then you could, in the moment, you're hoping to kind of be like, well, maybe that's just because he helped a woman that was being attacked by a drunk, you know. And at first you're
that's
you're
what
kind
it
of
is. He just loves protecting women.
Yeah, exactly. And sure enough, it's like the further you go into this, just the darker and kind of more abstract it gets. And I love too the whole orchestration of the newspaper. Like at one point, it just keeps following her, like, and he kind of has it through the sequence, like when she meets the pimp, I think it is, they call him the evil one or something like that. And you know, it goes right in between them, and then they move forward and he starts to kind of say, like, you know, you're going to do this with this rich guy, you're going to take him out into the club and all of that. And then and as they're talking again, I think they pulled it on like a string of some kind, because it kind of comes out from a pillar and then lands in between them again. And then it moves in underneath the wheels of the car that the rich guy pulls up in. So it feels like this thing that's kind of floating her onto the next sequence, into the next space, or meeting the next person. And the mysterious stabbings are, you know, obviously going to be eventually connected to her in some way. And that's...
Well, yeah, well, it's one of those things, is like, is it following her? Because the thing about it being a newspaper headline is maybe my favorite detail, because like, one, it tells you it's already happened, that they're already reporting on it. Someone's already been mysteriously stabbed. We don't know that she did it. We can kind of presume, based on her past behavior and the present behavior, that she had something to do with it. She loves stabbing people, as we learned. But there's something so funny about just like the doom it kind of foretells, the fact that it's kind of like it's trying to remind her. It's like, by the way, you've stabbed someone before, and also you're probably going to stab someone again. And that kind of sits in your mind while you're watching her get into the scenes with the very large rich man played by Bruno Vasoda, who I was talking about earlier, who I think is kind of looking like he's trying to do like a big boy era Orson Welles impression, and he's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, especially the one moment in particular, I wrote that down, was when he's like totally entranced by the dancer at the club, and they just keep doing big zoom ins in his face as he smokes the cigar. I was like, this is Orson Welles to a T.
Yeah, well, and the thing I like about the way that he's used is that when he picks her up, he takes her out for a night on the town, and she is used as like almost just like a casual plaything companion that he, you know, kind of, you know, seems like
he doesn't even pay attention to, really.
He doesn't really pay attention to her, but he assumes ownership of, based on this arrangement that he's made, right? And so he takes her from like bar to club. They're watching the way everyone drinks and smokes, and you're kind of casually observing the way that men treat women. And in this case, like, you do see, like, you know, a woman being grabbed and pawed at like one of the bars, or at one of the clubs you see a woman being objectified as the dancer on the stage, and the camera literally like zooms on her legs as, you know, it goes closer on the rich man's face while he's just like, wow, like look at those legs, and I can't wait to take this girl home with me, you know, kind of deal.
Yeah, and this is, I think, when she kind of, because it's almost like she disassociates in a way, and you get this sequence of her being in the cemetery, and there's this like
it's maybe my favorite sequence in the movie. That sequence is incredible, and also you're right that it dissolves into it, because the camera pushes in on her. It just happens when she's in the back of the limousine with the rich man going back to his penthouse, and it like dissolves into one of those like hypnosis circles that if you look at like the poster of the movie, you'll see that as well. It's like one of those like class. It's a really cheap effect, which is funny because it reminds me this, and I should point this out because this sequence is maybe where it's the most obvious. The cinematographer of this movie is a guy named William C. Thompson. We've actually talked about him before. He's most well known for being Ed Wood's cinematographer. So he shot Glenn or Glenda, Plan 9 from Outer Space, and Night of the Ghouls, all the movies that we've talked about.
To be honest.
And and you know what? And say what you will about Ed Wood's filmmaking craft and the quality of those films overall. Personally, we liked all of them. Yeah. But they do have a kind of cheap and rough, like black and white Poverty Row exploitation look, but that's deployed really, really productively to these like surreal avant-garde ends at times. And like this is the same thing where it's like it's such a cheap effect, but it's so effective because it literally just, you know, it has her like we're going into her mind, so you get this little spiral swirl and then we're in her mind, and where are we? We're in something Ed Wood loves more than anybody else, an old-timey foggy graveyard straight out of a Universal monster movie. And it was like they clearly didn't have much of a budget to do anything else, and it's one of the best sequences in the movie.
Yeah, and it turns into almost like it because of the lack of budget, they have to do these things that I think really work in a nightmare sequence or fantasy where, you know, they have the gravestones and instead of a lot of detail, they just say like father on it or mother. And it's really just a symbol of like the past and what she's lost and you know, who
dude,
she's
the creepy
killed.
Themasked man holding the lantern and being like, look over here, you know, kind of deal, like pointing her in that direction. And then suddenly my favorite thing about it is the way that it was clearly done for budgetary reasons, but it's such a fantastic decision to essentially have her starting to relive the memories of her father at her father's tombstone, of his being basically this like drunken scumbag who abused her and her mother. And once again, played by the same actor as the cop, which starts to put kind of two and two together. But the way that it does the scene is it doesn't just go back to like a cheap apartment. It actually puts the bed and the bedside table and the living room couch and all of these objects into the graveyard because they probably couldn't afford to do anything else. But it's so awesome because all